If you're looking for a new career move or a new entrepreneurship adventure, now's the time to listen in. I'm very excited today to be talking with Dan Abbate, who's the founder of Clotine Capital. I'm Andrea Hoffer, CEO of AHA Talent Experts, and we've collaborated with Dan to help him in recruiting capital managers, and that's what we'll be talking about today. Dan, thank you for coming today.
Of course. Thank you, Andrea. It's good to see you.
You too. I'm excited to hear more about this capital manager opportunity. It sounds like a great opportunity for someone who was a real estate agent or a broker, someone who's just looking for a new entrepreneurship type role.
Yeah.
Could you tell us a little bit of how Clotine Capital came into existence and what it is?
Yep, absolutely. So Clotine Capital is a fund, an alternative investment fund that focuses on cash flow and risk management for our investors. And that came out of that I've been doing deal by deal type investing for years. As my background is entrepreneurship, I've been involved in a lot of operating businesses, and that kind of evolved into investing and finding ways of essentially creating cash flow for myself without having to do the day-to-day operational entrepreneur stuff. And then once I wanted to scale that up, I realized I need to bring more people into this game with me so we can scale a lot faster. And I said, how do I do that in a way that kind of gives everyone the most focus so that they don't have to be doing all of the various things that we kind of get bogged down in, either in our entrepreneurial lives, or if you're coming from like a corporate background, kind of get stuck in sort of the corporate machine where you can't really move forward. And so the capital manager was the outcome of that, I guess, thought experiment, if you want to call it that. And the capital manager, the idea is that they can focus all of their attention on raising capital and making relationships with investors, making relationships with the networks that are going to get them into private equity, into institutional places, whatever their area of expertise is or what they want it to be, that's where they can focus. And the outcome for them, of course, is focusing on growing their own net worth, right? Because they need to pay attention to how they're growing their net worth, which a lot of times people that are in transactional businesses, like you mentioned, real estate, mortgage brokers, all those folks, those guys a lot of times get stuck in transactional, hey, I made a lot of money this month and I'm not making any money next month unless I sell my next thing. And so a capital manager doesn't work like that. A capital manager can grow a nest egg, which helps them with their day-to-day monthly income, whether they actually close something or not that month, as well as their net worth over time.
So it's a recurring model.
Correct.
So if they actually bring investors in who invest, they're getting a percentage of that on a recurring basis.
Correct. And it's worth mentioning that something that Clotine holds very dear, I guess if you want to use that kind of terminology, is that all of our structure is around cash flow and risk management. So we're not investing in Bitcoin. We're not investing in angel startup investments. We're not even doing any kind of VC stuff. We're really focused on real estate, AR financing, like things that have hard assets attached to them that produce immediate cash flow. So we believe in that so much that ourselves, as the fund, the capital managers kind of additionally, all get paid only if the investors already got the money that they were supposed to get. So we're so confident in our ability to produce the returns that we're producing is that everybody makes money only when we all make money together. So our investors, I don't even look at our investors as they're not like a separate entity that's independent of the fund. Like they're just another part of the puzzle that allows us all to scale and grow together.
Okay, so you can feel confident about going out to your network and saying, hey, I have these amazing investment opportunities, low risk, that you can share. So tell me a little bit about the persona of somebody who would be a successful capital manager.
Great question. We actually have a guy who was one of our first. He lives down in Dallas, and he was a commercial real estate guy, and actually continues to be. He will still do commercial real estate as well. But he treats the capital manager networking and connecting kind of the same way that he did his commercial real estate business. So he's out going to various events that kind of have the right people in the room, making those connections, building those relationships over time, because none of this stuff has to happen fast. And for some people it does, but other people build it up over time. And so it's really, the people who are the most successful in this role, like to stay focused on what I like to, like, this is kind of an exaggeration, but there's a little bit of a like, buy a Porsche, join the Porsche club, and hang out with cool people doing cool stuff. Like, so depending on what your situation is, it may not be buying a Porsche or whatever, but the point is, go out and do fun things with fun people who are the right people, and then just build those relationships and get to know the people who are going to be, most inclined to work with us and be part of our team. And like I said, we never approach investors as like customers or like third parties or anything like that. We really do think the investors bring the dollars, we bring the assets and the things to invest in, and the capital managers build that connection. So it's one big machine.
And say somebody does join as a capital manager, what type of training is available for them so that they can be successful at this?
Yeah, good question. So right from the get-go, I wanted to have an organization that wasn't structured like a traditional corporate hierarchy. So like we are a very flat and kind of community-focused organization, and it's very peer-to-peer. So the very first person that I hired when I set this up, aside from legal and accountants, right? So aside from lawyers and accountants, the very first operational person was our community manager. And really, she's organized both the how we all interact with each other from like a knowledge sharing basis. So from just literally from one capital manager. And by the way, I don't really count my title as being any different than a capital manager. That's just what I am as well. Because at this point, the company's large enough that everybody else does what they do. So really, my job is just to go out and talk to people, just like I'm doing right now. So, anyway, the capital managers within the company, there's a peer-to-peer type relationship. There's also a knowledge base that we have built that's all digital that people can log into and get all the different little helpful hints of like if they need documentation of the way that people have marketed before. I was just actually talking about one group was doing like digital ads and stuff like that as part of their outreach. So we asked them and they put all that stuff on our knowledge base. So it's all very much like a collaborative effort because there isn't one way to approach this. There isn't one investor base to go after. It really depends on basically what your network was before, because that's a good place to start, and like what areas you want to go and explore. I've got another capital manager that lives up in Ohio, and she's super into like travel and all that, like just as like something she's interested in. Yeah. And so she's using that whole like kind of travel community that she's like super involved in to like use that as her like way in for looking for investors and talking to people. So it's like a really great way to kind of integrate what you're interested in with what you're kind of doing with your capital management business, if you want to call it that, because that's kind of what it is. So it really should be very personalized to what you like to do, because I've always done it this way, and I encourage other people to as well. That you're more likely to succeed when you're doing things that you enjoy, and you're doing it in a way that you enjoy doing it. Like the way I operate might not be the way you like to operate. So it's better for each of us to follow our own path to produce kind of a similar outcome in the way that we like the best.
That's really interesting what you say. And I want to talk a little bit more about these investors that they're bringing in. Because sometimes when you actually first proposed this idea, I'm thinking, I need to find somebody who has millions of dollars to invest. But I actually attended one of your investment meetings a couple of weeks ago, and the minimum investment was $25,000. And actually, the cap on that investment was $125,000. So we're not talking about millions of dollars with each investor. So can you talk a little bit about the persona of the typical investor that you're looking for?
So the way that I like to say it is that our investors are mostly what you'd call mass affluent. So they're people that obviously have money to invest, like that's kind of part of the goal, but they aren't necessarily on the cover of Forbes. They're not the CEO of major corporations. They're small business owners. They are, corporate level people with, that have some good cash flow, but maybe want to invest in things alternative to their, regular 401ks and all that sort of stuff. That's kind of it's that doctors, lawyers, those sorts of folks. That kind of mass affluent category is a big part of it. So the capital managers that want to access those communities in their local area or even international area, depending on how far they're reaching, that's kind of what they can kind of go after. It's also worth mentioning that I have another capital manager who is an ex-investment banker. So they come from like a Wall Street background. So they're not going to the mass affluent. They're kind of going more to family offices, small private equity groups, the groups that they already have those contacts with, and they're still continuing to work in those communities. And one of the advantages that we found from what she's been doing is that the Wall Street crowd and the kind of entrepreneurial, like alternative crowd, they sort of are, there's a divide between them, not for any good reason. It's just that the way that they kind of operate in the world that they run in is like sort of disconnected from the world where this kind of alternative crowd is. And so the more links I think we can bridge between those two, there's a lot of opportunity there. And so it's going to take the capital managers on an individual basis figuring out how to make those links. And so that's what she's doing. And I can imagine we're going to have a lot of other investment bankers that, got tired of working 90 hours a week for, $100,000 a year, and then they're looking for alternatives. So
yeah, especially right now where the stock market is, can be unsteady
Correct.
at times and nobody
Exactly.
knows what it's doing. That investment meeting that I attended for Clotine, we had this breakout session, which I thought was really interesting. I do want to dive into that a little bit in a minute. But the people in my breakout session were what I would term retirees, a little bit older, a couple. They didn't seem to be currently working, but they were looking for an alternative place to put their well-earned, hard-earned money. And I asked them, how'd you hear about this? And they said, well, our real estate agent told us, and we trust him, and so we thought we'd come and check it out. So I just wanted to mention that.
Yeah.
But the community aspect, I think, is very unique, and I think it's a benefit of being a capital manager.
Yep.
Can you talk to us a little bit more about that? What does the community look like?
So if there's, depending on what everyone who's listening experiences, there's a bunch of different organizations that fall into this kind of like peer-to-peer network type organization, like Entrepreneurs Organization, Young Presidents Organization, Vistage. These are all long established organizations that take a particular group of people and kind of allow them to share and connect with each other so that they all boats rise kind of scenario, right? And so that's how we have it very deliberately set up. And so that what you mentioned about calling in, having people go into those breakout rooms, that's a continued and always deliberate effort to build those bonds of community. So again, we're not a transactional business. Like anybody who feels like, oh, I just am trying to get in here so I can make $1 and then move on to the next thing or whatever, probably not the right fit, right? Like it's like we really are building a community where, again, I'm just going to list them out again: investors, capital managers, and our asset managers, and then the fund itself as an organization are all. We need all those pieces in order to succeed, and so that's why the community is so important. So that it's not just about, look, at the end of the day, there's all kinds of places that you can invest, but I think it's the community aspects of what we have that encourage everyone to stay connected and continue to grow this business.
That's great.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you would share about this that you think people need to know?
I try to tell people that that a lot of people don't know, like, that alternative investments even exist because they're only used to either what the bank will give you or they're used to whatever like public market mutual funds and all that stuff is, right? Like those are kind of like the two things, even people with sometimes lots of money, those are the only two things they're familiar with. And the alternative world is a massive multi-trillion-dollar industry like any other that usually is dominated by organized private equity, institutional type folks. But then there's this entrepreneurial kind of group of investors and asset managers that are always functioning. And so we're trying to scale that up. That's kind of our mission, if you want to call it a mission, is to kind of scale up the amount of people that can participate in that alternative world. And the reason to do that, you might say, well, why? Who cares, right? Like you can go to the bank or you can go to, the S&P 500. Who cares, right? Well, the reason I care is that the S&P 500's average return, including a lot of volatility, so average return is like 8% roughly, 7.5%, 8%, depending on what period you look at. These alternative investments that we invest in, we're targeting 10, 11, 12% all the time. Like, it doesn't matter what the economy is doing. We're always in that, 10, 11, 12% return to our investors. 8, 9 is not unusual either. We can find 8, 9 is pretty good. But the thing to note versus the S&P 500 is when I give you those numbers, I mean that's an actual number that we anticipate making because we signed a contract or an agreement to produce that outcome. We don't have the volatility of the stock market that we have to worry about. We don't have the problem, and this is why you mentioned some retirees. Sometimes older people, they have this big 401k that they've built up over the years, and it's great. They watch that number go up, but it's just a number on a screen. They never really get a check each month or a check each quarter. Our focus is always on producing actual real cash flow that goes back to our investors. And if they want to reinvest it with us, great. If they want to go out and spend it on living expenses or buy a car or go on vacation, they can do that too. We always are producing real cash flow. So I think that's worth mentioning that's our focus. And from a risk perspective, our risk is generally, again, managed by hard assets. And I don't want to it depends on the deal. But for the most part, I always like to tell people we're not FDIC insured, so we're not like a bank, but we kind of place ourselves just above from a risk perspective as well as from a cash perspective, like from a return perspective. We're always above the bank, just a little bit on the risk because we're not FDIC insured. And then on the cash flow side from a bank, we're usually sometimes double or more than what you get like in a CD or something. I mean, just recently, CDs are now like 5% or whatever. So when we're talking 10, we're double. But like a few years ago, not even a few years ago, at 2%, we were 5 times what the bank was, So it's all about consistency and risk management, which is the key.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
I think you've shared a lot of great information with us, and I know that there is an informational session coming up.
That's right.
So for people who are interested in learning more about being a capital manager, we will put the group information, invite information in this post so that you have it. But before we wrap up, can you just give us a couple of points of what they'll learn in this informational session and what it will be like?
Good question. Yeah. So we've got about I'd say 20-minute presentation that goes over all the details of what it means to be a capital manager. I've given a very high-level view of that today, but we'll go into the details of what does your day actually look like if you want to be a capital manager? What are the goals that you want to hit in order to achieve whatever your financial goal is? Some people look at it and say, I want to generate $300,000 a year as quickly as possible. Okay, cool. Here's the math on what you have to do to achieve that, right? Or I want to create a net worth over the next 5 to 10 years of $10 million. Cool. Here's the goal of what you have to do to achieve that. So that sort of stuff, that'll be the conversation. Our main goal is to just find the right people and get them on the path.
Great, thank you. So I want to thank you, Dan, for joining me today. I think you've shared a lot of good information. And to all of you who are watching this and are interested in the capital manager position at Clotine Capital, please sign up for one of the upcoming informational sessions. And again, the link to that information will be below. And thank you again. Thanks, Dan.
Thank you.